Hello, this is Lino Tadros from Falafel Software. Welcome to part 2 of showing you how to deal with the Windows Azure and Sitefinity 4. In our first part in here that we showed in a previous video, we used a specific Sitefinity installation, and we only changed the SQL implementation to SQL Azure, but the entire Sitefinity system itself was running locally on my machine. In this video in here, we're going to show how to actually move the entire Sitefinity, not only the SQL Azure part, but the hosting itself, everything to be running on Windows Azure as well. Alrighty, so the first part we're going to start with is the fact that this implementation that I showed you earlier in a previous video, this Sitefinity web app running locally on my machine is using SQL Azure, and that is of course available to see here by going to show all files from Visual Studio. That is my app data Sitefinity configuration. If you open up the data config file, it is still pointing to the DB type of SQL Azure. It has my connection string and my username and everything hitting my SQL Azure right there. Alright, so far so good, this is working. So what are the pieces that I need to do? First of all, the license that I have in here, folks, this license is for a standard version of Sitefinity 4. Unless you go ahead and purchase the extra piece that you can put on top of the Sitefinity Standard Edition for load balancing, you will not be able to get this to work, especially when you have multiple machines that you're going to do load balancing on. If you buy the professional version or the enterprise version, you will be able to do this with no problem without having any extra pieces to buy and so on. Otherwise, with the standard, you have to buy the extra piece for load balancing to be able to do that. So this license, we know for a fact that this is not going to work. So I need to change this license to something else that I can get from my account on the Telerik website for Sitefinity, so I can get my new license with the load balancing, or I can download my professional license or enterprise license for this to work. So I already downloaded that. It's available in here. It's called Sitefinity Pro license. That's for a professional edition. Let me go ahead and copy this file, and I am going to go into where the website is being installed. Is on the C drive, program files. It is Telerik. We'll go to Sitefinity 4.1 projects, and in here we'll have our test Azure project in here. There is the app data, that is Sitefinity, and there is my Sitefinity license. I'm going to delete this guy from here, and I'm going to paste the new one, and we'll call it Sitefinity.license. Okay, we're good at this point, and the only thing left for me to do at this point is to go ahead and make a couple of changes in here. First of all, in the project, I would like to make the configuration directory to be part of the project. As you can see, if I turn off the show everything in the web application in Visual Studio, you cannot see the license, and you cannot also see the configuration directory under Sitefinity. It's a good idea to actually click on the show all and make the configuration directory part included in the project. So we'll say include in project in here. That's an important piece. And also the license itself, I will also include in the project at this point. This is only for Azure deployment. These pieces are important. Also, if you click on the Sitefinity license after you have included it into the project, you will notice that the build action is none. You need to make this build action to content. That's why I actually included the license to be part of the project. Otherwise, you will not have access to the build action. So it has to be content. It cannot be none. Otherwise, the license will not be transferred as part of the Azure deployment. Alrighty? Very important to do this piece as well. Now, when I show all files, turn it off, I still have my configuration, and I still have my license being part of the entire installation. Alright, now let's go ahead and leave Visual Studio here for a second. We'll get back to it to make some more modification to my web.config file later. But for right now, let's go ahead and open up my browser Chrome in here. And I need to go ahead and do some maintenance to prepare the stage for what we want to do with this website. So I'm going to go and log in into my Azure, Windows Azure system in here. We'll say my account, I believe, is Azure, falafel.com. I'm going to log in to the system, and we'll say go forward. And we already have a lot of different applications from Falafel software installed, so don't worry about that. I can actually go to my hosted services. We have our event board and a lot of different things running here in the cloud that service our iPhone application, iPad, Android, and Windows Phone 7 application. But what I would like to do is to click on hosted services in here, and that is my event board with all the certificates from Apple and Windows Phone 7 and all the stuff. That is not something we're interested in right now. What I'm interested in is to go to the Falafel Azure cloud, and I would like to go ahead and create a brand new hosted service. So we'll click on new hosted service in here, and I'm going to choose the Falafel Azure. That's the only one we have right now. And let's go ahead and create a new name for the service. We'll call it Sitefinity SF4 Cloud, for instance. How about that? Alrighty. So we'll say SF4 Cloud. We can enter a prefix for your service. We'll call it SF4 Cloud cloudapp.net. And in here, we can actually choose a region where we would like to run this. This is an important piece, for instance. If I choose a region in here, usually this is something for myself here from California. I'd like to do this in the United States. If you're in Europe or in Asia, you use a different region. The reason why I wanted to show you this is because if you choose just anywhere in the US, it could be in multiple different places at the end of the day. And when you create your storage later on, it might not be the best performance possible to have them in a completely different region. So what I would recommend for you is to create a region in here. All right, you can create a region maybe in the United States, the same place where your storage is going to be, so that when you end up creating the storage later on, they can both be relatively close. That will make it much, much better as far as performance. For right now, instead of actually having to worry about that, this will still work. I'm going to just use a region, which will be anywhere in the United States. It's fine. Here, I'm not going to deploy anything, so I'm going to turn it off. Notice you will not have to add anything. So for right now, I just want to prepare the cloud and tell it to create a brand new hosting service called SF4 Cloud for me. That's great. We'll go ahead and say OK there. It's going to validate all this information, and you will notice it will take a few seconds to create the SF4 Cloud as a new hosting service for the Falafel Azure. It will also allow you to create certificates if you're going to run this on HTTPS. If you would like to upload your 128-bit encrypted certificate in here, this is a great place to add your certificate if you would like. If you would like your site to run over HTTPS and so on. So it's fully ready to go. The only pieces in here that I'd like to show you as well is that the storage account. I have multiple accounts for other applications, but I'd like to create a brand new one as well. We'll say new storage in here. And the URL for this, I would like to make this something like SF4 logs, for instance. By the way, you cannot have capital letters in here. It has to be no capital letters. We'll say SF4 logs. There you go. So if I create a URL that starts with SF4 logs for the core windows.net, this is where I'm going to tell later on Sitefinity that if anytime it needs to log something in the log files of Sitefinity, to keep it actually in the cloud as well. This was something missing in the first releases of Sitefinity 4. You could not do this piece to tell Sitefinity to put that. Otherwise, it really didn't make sense how you're going to do load balancing if the log files are outside of the cloud itself. So it didn't make sense. But now you will be able to do that. This is a good place. If I would have actually created a region where my hosted service will be, I could have actually come in here and chose exactly the same affinity to that specific region that I created so that they can be close to each other, where the application is hosted and where my storage is available. In this case in here, we'll just go ahead and say anywhere in the United States as well is fine. And I'm going to click on OK in here. And I got myself an SF4 log storage area being created in the cloud right now. So let's give it a couple of seconds to create all the stuff, and I'll be back as soon as it finishes creating my storage. And there we go. It actually took about 3 to 4 minutes to finish this piece. You will notice during the 3-4 minutes that it's trying, the status will be something like resolving DNS and so on. So once it's done, you don't need to do anything. Just give it enough time, and the SF4 logs will be created for you and be ready to go. All right, so now we have our storage account being created. We have also our hosted service for SF4 Cloud is created, and we are ready to go now back to Visual Studio and start doing a little bit of surgery to get the application ready to be deployed. First piece here in Visual Studio, that is my project. I would like to go to my web.config file, and let's go ahead and do our surgery. I'm going to actually take the stuff out so you can see it better here on the screen. The first thing that we'll have to do, we'll have to find where our section group name is, and there it is. And you notice Telerik already have entered this and commented it out for you. So if you're going to use Windows Azure, this piece in here that has a section group called Telerik, it has to be included as section handler. And the section group called Telerik is being added at the bottom of this file. If you're not going to use the Windows Azure, it is being put in there just for a reminder. You can uncomment it if you'd like to use Azure. So I'm going to go ahead and uncomment this right now. So now my new section called Telerik will take place, no problem. If you go all the way to the bottom of the web.config file, you'll see the section called Telerik right here. Okay, so I'm going to comment this one as well. What does this do for us? First of all, it will enable the environment for Sitefinity to run in the platform of Windows Azure, and the Sitefinity config storage mode will be database, which is extremely important if you would like to do load balancing. Otherwise, it will be difficult for the database to keep track of all the logs. If you're going to do it manually somewhere in the application itself or local, doesn't make sense. So it has to be in the database so that if it needs to load balance to somewhere else, it will automatically pick this up and go forward. And by the way, the name of the table where all the logs will go in is called WAD logs and log file, and you can actually take a look at that in the database in your SQL Azure later on if you'd like. The other piece actually that you really need to be concerned about as well in this file is the part about the service model. There it is. There is a line here for the service hosting environment. It's by default is true, but you just want to make sure that this is correct. The multiple site bindings enabled has to be true. Actually, it is the default is true, but just make sure, because if this is false, it will not allow for the load balancing to work as well. So these are the only three things you have to really worry about inside of this config file. Enabling the Telerik handler and just making the Telerik handler all the way, the section for the handler in here is turned on for telling it as the platform, and also the multiple site binding is set to true. Okay, let me go ahead and save this file now, the config file. I'm going to close it down. And let's go ahead and take a look at the next part that you need to be very worried about for doing this with Azure. The references of your DLLs, all the assemblies referenced in here. There's tons of assemblies in here. Some of them will be yours, some of them will actually be references for your own custom controls and so on. You want to make sure that when you click on any of these things, the copy local is set to true. Very important that all of these are copy local equal to true. Okay, that will make a big difference for the deployment and for making this to work in SQL Azure. I'm sorry, for Windows Azure. Okay. All right, there is, of course, nothing is as simple as that. Some of these assemblies, folks, cannot be copy at local. So I'm just saying, in the beginning, make sure all of them are copy local, and let's go through the ones that you cannot have being copy local. First of all, the system.windows assembly, this guy in here, cannot be copy local. Okay, it has to be set false. If you leave system.windows actually copy local, it will cause some serious problems in the cloud. And there's a couple more that I would like to tell you about. For instance, the Microsoft Windows Azure Service Runtime. Let's go ahead and find out where this guy is. Microsoft, yeah, it would be in the M's. There you go. That is the Microsoft Service Windows Azure Service Runtime. This guy have to copy local equals to false as well. Okay, make sure it is false for this one. And the other ones is MySQL data and the Telerik Open Access for MySQL need to be also copy local equals to false. So we'll find out, first of all, where is MySQL data. There it is. It is copy local equals to false. And the Telerik Open Access for the MySQL one is also copy locals to false. Okay. The final one is the interrupt for the Dexter library. This guy also needs to be copy local equals to false. So as long as you go through these 4 or 5, and they are available in the documentation. If you go to Sitefinity documentation, it will tell you about these 4 or 5 files in the references as DLLs that have to be copy local as false. Everything else needs to stay as copy local equal to true, including your own DLLs and assemblies that you have created for widgets and modules and so on. Sounds good? Alrighty. The next part is that we're going to leave this specific project, which is the Sitefinity Web App project, and we're going to have to create a brand new project into that solution. Of course, to do this part, you'll have to have the Windows Azure Toolkit for Visual Studio installed. So you can go to the website for Microsoft, look for the Windows Azure Toolkit. It's free, and it will take a few seconds, and it will install itself into Visual Studio. And from that point on, when you say File, New Project, you will get a new section in Visual Studio that's called the Cloud, and you will be able, there you go, I have a cloud in here. That will get installed once you have the Windows Azure Toolkit for Visual Studio installed. And that is my Windows Azure project. Let's give it a name, for instance. We'll call it SF4 Cloud Test. There you go. And I'm going to actually add this to the current solution available. We'll say OK there. And notice it will add another project. By the way, this new window for Azure project is asking you to create a role. We're going to do that in a few seconds. You do not need to enter any roles in here in Windows Azure at all. So I'm going to say OK, and we'll just bypass this for right now. So that is my other project. It's called SF4 Cloud Test. Alrighty. Notice the roles are empty in here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click on the roles. I'm going to say add, and I'm going to add web role projects in solution. So if I click on that, I'm going to make the website, the Sitefinity web app that I have at the bottom in here, the other project, be the role for this SF4 Cloud Test. This is the easiest way to do it, actually, instead of trying to figure it out yourself. We'll say just OK there. And it will add the Sitefinity web app right in here. Okay, now let's go ahead and double click this Sitefinity web app and start going ahead and configuring our role, which will be very important for Azure to make this work. First of all, the configuration piece. I'm going to say full trust, and I'm going to also allow for instance of one count. What is this one count in here, folks? This is the amount of instance that can be running. You're probably going to use this as a one machine. If you need to understand actually how the different instances, whether you would like an extra large, large, medium, small, or extra small instance, you can actually click here on the information, and it will open up a web browser, and this is the page right there, to explain exactly what does that mean. Right now it's using one CPU, one core CPU. It's using 1.75 gigabyte. And it tells you about the disk space and the allocated bandwidth allowed for megabit per second. If you need to do load balancing, it starts from the medium one, of course. You'll have 2 CPUs or 3.5 gigs and so on. But you can see you can actually move to 4 CPUs to 8 CPUs with 14 gig of RAM. So you can scale this however you'd like. What is the nice thing about this, folks? Let me go ahead and shut this down for a second. The nice thing about this, folks, is once this is deployed to the cloud, moving from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 does not require a repackaging or even stopping the application running. I can actually change the instance count on the fly, and the system will pick it up right away. So you'll not have to stop your Sitefinity application. You don't have to do anything. You can actually just change the configuration to move it to multiple CPUs. So if you find out that your website is being hit heavily on a Friday, you can automatically scale it up to 4 CPUs or 8 CPUs or whatever you'd like to do, without having to stop or modify packages or do anything like that. So this stuff is possible to change it on the fly after the fact, after you have deployed your system. For this one, I'm going to leave it as one instance right now because I don't want to pay too much money for giving you this demo already. So the final part in here is the diagnostics, and I'm going to enable diagnostics. That means how I'm going to allow Sitefinity to log to a file. So I'm going to click on this ellipsis in here, and it's going to ask me if I want to use the Windows Azure Storage Emulator or do I have my own credential. And in my case in here, I'm going to say yes, enter storage account credential. What do you think this is, folks? This will require the key that I got from my storage when I created it. So let me go back to this guy. Remember the storage account in here called SF4 logs. If you take a look at the right side, it will tell you actually all the URLs for the blobs and the tables and the queues. But the most important part is the primary access key in here. If I view it, it will actually tell you this is your primary access key. This is a very secretive key nobody should know, and I don't mind showing you because I'm going to delete the storage anyway after this video, so it's not a big deal. I'm going to move it to my clipboard. I'm going to allow Silverlight to give me access to my clipboard. And now I have this entire key into my clipboard. We'll say close this guy. And now let's go back to Visual Studio again. Now I'm going to paste this key in here. Very important key, otherwise it will not give you access to your storage from inside of your application. And in here we'll say, for instance, SF4 logs. Okay? And we'll say OK there. And this part is done. The next piece, we'll go to settings here. We'll go to the endpoint. Yes. In the endpoint in here, it's important to create a brand new endpoint. Let's go ahead and create one. It needs to be called Sitefinity internal endpoint. See, if you call it Sitefinity internal endpoint in here, we'll make it an internal one, and it will be an HTTP. And I do not need to enter any private port or SSL certificate or anything like that. This will all be done automatically by Sitefinity. Sitefinity knows how to find this endpoint and configure it correctly. So you don't need to do anything other than that. I'm going to save this file. And finally, for a local storage, for instance, let's go ahead and click on local storage. I'm going to create a local storage in here. Let's go ahead and call it, for instance, something like libraries temp. I'm going to create a 1 gig out of that. And we'll say clean, unroll, recycle. Right, so that's the only thing you need to do in here. We'll save this guy as well. If you have any certificates that you'd like to load, you can do that. Virtual networks, you can activate that, but Sitefinity does not need all this. We are now ready to go. We have actually our one instance. We have our the key being entered in here for our local storage. We have our settings in here, automatically have the key inside of it. The endpoints have the Sitefinity internal endpoint. It's an internal, it's an HTTP. And we are in good shape, and we're almost ready to go. All right, so now we can close this guy. I'm going to save everything. And one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and build this entire Azure project that I just created. Hopefully we'll get this as a success. It is a success. And now I'm ready to publish this entire project. So we'll right-click on it. We'll say Publish. This dialog will show up for you. Or maybe not. Maybe this is the new version actually of the Windows Azure Toolkit. Maybe what I want to do is not publish. This is if in case you want to publish directly into the cloud, but I'm going to actually say cancel that. I would like to upload it myself inside of my hosting service. So I'm going to go back in here, right click and say package. Let's go ahead and package that. The server configuration will be local. Okay, and the build configuration, we'll put it in debug or release. It's up to you, definitely, whether it's a staging or a production. I'm going to say package that, and it's going to compile the whole thing. And when it comes back, hopefully it will be successful and would have created the two files for me, which is the configuration and the package itself. And there we go. That dialog from the Windows Explorer will show up by itself, showing you that the service configuration local CS config is available, and the SF4 Cloud Test is available as well. Alrighty. So with having these two in here under my debug for the SF4 Cloud Test project in Sitefinity 4, I would be able to go ahead and upload it now manually myself into to the system. So let's go ahead and do that. I am going to go in here. We'll go back to my hosted service again. That is my SF4 Cloud. And I can choose now if I would like this to be a production service or a staging service. Most people will start with a staging service in here to upload everything, and then after they test it, they can actually promote it to production so that they can go back and forth between staging and production on the cloud itself. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and choose the staging service. In here, that is subscription for Falafel Azure. The service name is SF4 Cloud. It's a staging service. The deployment name, we'll call it, for instance, SF4, we'll say deployment. Alrighty, and now it's asking me for the two files that I just created, the package location and the configuration file. We're going to browse for them locally on the machine, and we are going to go to Program Files, Telerik. There it is, Sitefinity 4.1, Projects, and hopefully the one we just created is called SF4 Cloud Test right here. So it will be under the bin, debug. If I open up my publish in here, that is my CS package. It's about 61 megs. That's the entire package, that's including the whole website, web application, and everything. So I'm going to upload this guy. We'll say open. And then the second one will be the simple CS config file. In here, we'll say open. OK. And we're done. Always you're going to get this warning as soon as it finds out that you have only one CPU chosen. If you have multiple, you probably will not get this, but this warning is normal because we actually chose to have only one CPU. Okay, so don't be worried about that. This is just telling you, hey, go ahead please and spend some more money and give us some more CPUs so we can actually bill you. Alrighty, we'll say yes there. And now you're going to have to be really patient. You're going to have to go get yourself a couple of coffees, because this might actually take between an hour to an hour and 15 minutes based on how heavy load is going on. But right now the upload itself will not take time at all. The entire 61 megs and so on will take a few seconds to upload all that stuff. But after it uploads the entire package into the cloud, you might need to leave it for about maybe an hour to an hour and 15 minutes for the cloud itself to deploy everything to the deployment, to link everything to the storage accounts, to do everything it needs to do regarding the endpoint, and at the end it will give you a long URL for the staging. When you click on it, you'll be able to see the entire website running for the cloudapp.net URL, and your system will be running based on SQL Azure, and the whole thing will be running inside of the Windows Azure itself. And it's almost done. It's finished 100% of the deployment to be uploaded, and now it's finalizing the upload, and now it's creating the whole deployment into the cloud itself. And that's the piece that you need to be really patient with at this point. As I said, it will take between an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. So I'm going to stop the video now, and we'll come back in about an hour, and we'll see what ended up being created for us in here. And this is about maybe 5 to 6 minutes into it. You can see that the deployment not only started, it also started the role that I told it about. It's starting that, and it's now trying to start this, the instance itself. So you can see multiple things are going to happen. The thing that is important to understand is that we did not touch all that stuff. This is all happening by just uploading the packages. You're done. You just have to be patient. You can actually monitor what's going on here in the Silverlight application, and you can see that the instance is being created, the role is being initialized, and the SF4 deployment. You can see here on the side, this will end up being the URL, how to get to the system. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. So once this is all done, and it will tell you success, you will end up with this, an HTTP which has a GUID in it, .cloudapp.net. Remember, this is a staging service, okay? That means when you do a production, you can have a real name in here. You can, of course, go to your DNS on your system, and I can say, for instance, sitefinity.falafel.com, and I can actually do a CNAME to actually reroute all that stuff into my own DNS so that you don't have to give people .cloudapp.net. So when they go to sitefinity.falafel.com, for instance, they will automatically get into the cloud application. But for staging, usually it's okay to leave it like that, just for testing until you're ready to do this. Alrighty? And for our good luck, it didn't take that long. Actually, took less than 25 minutes this time. So it's all depending on what's going on at the time. Sometimes it can take all the way to an hour, hour and a half, to be honest with you, but sometimes it can go pretty fast. There is my SF4 deployment. It says ready, 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 and we're all good in here, and we are ready to go ahead and test our Sitefinity site. So let's go ahead and do that. And to test this, I'm just going to go ahead and click on this link in here, and that should take us to this URL that has this big number with the GUID.cloudapp.net. If you click on it, we got an error, and the error is, it says that the could not load file or assembly telerik.open access version blah blah blah. Guess what this problem is? Can you imagine what probably could that be? Let me show you what that is. If I go to Visual Studio back in here, folks, if you open up references in here, I told you everything in here needs to be copy at local except there's 5 different assemblies. One of them was done incorrectly, this Telerik Open Access. If I click on it, that is wrong. It cannot be copy local, it's false. This guy has to be copy local equal to true. So now at least you get to see what happens if you miss one of the DLLs that have to be copy local. If they are set incorrectly to false in here, when you deploy it to the cloud will not be able to find this DLL and it will not work. So there you go. So instead of actually having to do all that stuff, you'll have to take my word for it. We just need now to go ahead and compile this guy, and I'm going to have to deploy the whole thing again by right-clicking and saying package, and after it compiles the entire Sitefinity web app and packages the whole thing, I will be able to deploy it. I've done this before and it works just fine. Just you have to make sure that you don't forget any of the assemblies not to be copied at local. So if you would like to wait another maybe 20-25 minutes and then go ahead and deploy that, you will be able to see the website running completely in the cloud. The website itself and the SQL Azure as well. Okay. So I took the last 15-20 minutes to fix the problem. Let me show you what I did so you have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. Some of the Telerik open access DLLs were not set to copy local to true. So I went to all of them, made sure that all of them are set copy local to true except the one I told you about for MySQL.data is false. Okay. Other than that, everything else is set to true. What I had to do in here is to compile the Sitefinity app. That you can see he's successful. Went back to my cloud from my Azure project, compiled this one as well, and it's successful. And finally, I right-clicked on it and I created the package again. So I will say create the package, and notice in here it will take a couple of seconds and it will create the entire package and the configuration file as well. And the important part is after that we go inside of here. That is my my Windows Azure Platform Silverlight application. That is my previous SF4 deployment. And now I would like to upgrade it with the new package. So I clicked on upgrade all the way at the top in here. And you can actually set it to automatic or manual, and you can do it later yourself. I left it at automatic, and I came here and uploaded my my application here for the package, as you can see. And also I went to the configuration file and then uploaded the config file like we did before. So once you actually make a mistake and you found an error, you have to go ahead and fix it in Visual Studio and then bring back the entire package and configuration file to be uploaded and upgraded. Once I did that, you have to be patient again for maybe about 15-20 minutes because it will do the whole job again to redeploy. If everything worked well, folks, you will be able to click here to test if your staging server is running. So let's go ahead and click on this guy. And voila, wow, that was pretty fast. So that is my URL for the cloudapp.net, and this is my Sitefinity 4.1 application running using SQL, Azure, and the whole thing running correctly in the system. Hopefully this video was useful to you, and you can see firsthand what exactly that needs to be done to make all that stuff work in the SQL, Azure, and the Windows Azure. There is a lot of steps, but once you do it once, I think it's pretty simple. The documentation is pretty straightforward on that, but I thought it would be a good idea to see it happening in front of you as well. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.